Hello, SpongicX here for another episode of Conkers Bad Fur Day. Here we are exploring the spooky chapter. Yeah, compared to the Xbox version, the N64 version of this stage isn't very special. It just kind of looks like the Hangover level, except a little gloomier. But boy, did they give it such a creepy overhaul in the remake. Giving it rivers of blood, a lot of gothic gargoyle statues here and there. I will admit the moon looks a lot better in this one, though. It looks more exaggerated. You can actually dive underwater during this part, though. You cannot do that in the remake for some reason.
I don't bloody believe it. They've got fish versions of the little bastards now. Come here. I'll show them. Oh, what's the little f***s again? I got your number, mate. It's down to 2 for you. Ah, there's a Warner. Yes, not long for you now, you little prick.
Yeah, I wonder how awkward this scene would be if you somehow managed to make it this far in the game without losing a life. Without, you know, seeing the cutscene that introduces you to Greg. You have to wonder how that would go down. Yeah, I like how in the remake it looks like you're going inside a giant vampire's mouth, like during this part, but instead it's just a wooden frame door. Ah! God, I hate that. Now I gotta go all the way back there. There we go. Platforming sections where there's a ceiling too close above your head are no fun at all, because of reasons like that.
Oh, you again. Why don't you piss off? Can't you see I'm busy? I suppose you want to go up there now, do you? Where there's lots of money, no doubt. One of those rich ancestors of yours. Bloody undead. Unbloody dead. I mean, it's even worse than bloody cats. Undead. What's the bloody point? You may be needing a bit of help. So I've got this. I hate the undead. Hate them. The only thing that kills them. Shot to the head. Nothing more, nothing less. Here. Better than a pissing frying pan, that's for sure. Take it. That's it. Piss off.
Shotgun. Yeah. Don't like the sound of zombies.
Greg was
though.
always my favorite
Still, it gets on
character.
his nerves, and that's
It's
all
kind of
I need.
interesting to know that in the
What was
sequel
that
he would have
about,
played a more
ancestor?
villainous role.
Undead
In this one, it feels
ancestor.
like he's helping out
Well, the
Conker
undead
against
then
his will. In the
technically
sequel,
that
he
makes
definitely
him
would have had
kinda
enough
dead,
of it to the point where
which
he
means I should
wants
get the inheritance.
Conker's last
I mean,
life
how bad can a handful of
permanently.
dead people be? They're dead. Well, undead. Now, let's see. Shotgun. I think it's one of those B-pressing moments.
I like
here.
how you can press B at any point during this part, so it's kind of fun to try like changing the scenery before pulling it out, like right here, pulling it out right next to Greg.
Let's go.
Kind of cool. So I noticed there's a really funny like little visual error in the N64 version of this. If you shoot the water, it'll actually make a crack effect as if you're shooting through glass. I mean, it's one thing for that effect to occur like on the dock or the walls, but the water, that's just hilarious. Here's a closer look at what it looks like. What kind of water is this? Yeah, I noticed like in this version they tried making the gun look and shoot a little more realistically, but for some reason in the remake they gave it more of a sci-fi effect. It's like when it shoots, it leaves kind of like a blue glow behind on the bullet holes. I mean, yeah, it's really strange how in both versions you have like a red laser to pinpoint, and it gives kind of like a sci-fi sound effect. But other than that, it's kind of weird how more sci-fi it was in the Xbox version. This part can be very eerie if you have the volume up really loud. Yeah, for an N64 game, this was pretty creepy. I hate the controls during this part, though. They're a lot better in the Xbox remake. At least you could actually jump in the Xbox version. But, luckily, you know, it's not too much easier, though, because although they made the controls a lot easier in the remake, they made the enemy AI a lot harder. In the N64 one, they, occasionally take, like, a break, like they stop moving for a bit, and that's usually the best moment when you can shoot them in the head, but in the Xbox remake, they're almost always moving. And they come in different shapes and sizes during the mansion escape scene, so yeah. This area is pretty fun to explore, though, after you get rid of all the zombies. There's a lot of funny tombstones that you can read on the side. And yeah, the scenery's really cool, too. I like all the falling leaves and even the sound effects, the howling wind and stuff like that. It really gives it kind of a creepy atmosphere. For some reason, N64 games loved putting, like, haunted levels throughout their platformers. Whether it was Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, even non-platformer games like Diddy Kong Racing, with Haunted Woods. I kind of wish, like, they used more enemy designs, though. It kind of gets tiring when you see the same, male and female squirrel models reused over and over for this zombie segment. Kind of wish they chose a little more variety during this part. Or at least for the remake, for crying out loud. I can understand for this, maybe, but the remake, come on. Am I expected to believe that all these people who died happened to look the same? Happen to be wearing the same clothes, have the same hair color, have the same fur color. Ridiculous. Yeah, they made the depths of the zombies look a little more grotesque in the Xbox version. Like, you just see, like, all this, it's like when they're decaying, you see, like, all this kind of, like, violent fizzing coming out of them, and, they leave, like, some kind of yellow chunks behind. I don't know what they're supposed to be, maggots or rotting flesh, but it's gross looking.
Ah, not bad, I suppose. That's another 12 souls. Right, come on, in you go. And I think you'll find that you're the one who'll be needing a will. Inheritance.
I find it strange how Greg sounded a bit off during that. It's like they forgot to... They didn't put in the right sound pitch that they use for him normally, so he sounded less high-pitched than he normally does. Yeah, it's a shame. Like, one thing that always irks me about this game is how, you know, it's like, I love the attention to detail. It just bugs me how small a lot of these levels are. I kind of wish there was more to explore. It would make going back and replaying this game a lot more fun. Instead, because, as much as I love this game, I'll admit, though, that, it does get kind of tiring to replay at times, though, because it's just such a short game. There's just not... You know, I have more fun, like, replaying games like Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie because there's just so much to see and explore. Whether it's, you know, resuming progress from a game you've already beaten or just starting a new game all over. With Conker, though, it's like no matter what, the game is just so linear, so you're always going to come across the same stuff over and over. It's a shame that the sequel would have taken some similar notes, too. They said they wanted the sequel to be linear as well. I personally think, like, if they ever made a sequel, they should try going more of a Mario Odyssey approach. Have the game, you know, be like a mixture of open world, but have a few linear objectives. So, you know, the story mode can be linear, but then it's like for going back and replaying the game. It's like there can definitely be like heavy chapter critical moments, or you know, they can still have the chapter replay like they did in this game, but I'd like there to be more to do throughout the game. Like, unfortunately, this is one of those games where after you beat the story, there's no resuming your progress. That save file, every time you go back to it. Well, it's like in the N64 version, going back to the save file just plays the final cutscene, but in the Xbox remake, they actually had it where you couldn't even go back to it. It just lets you know that that story is complete, and so the only way to go through it again is to delete it and start over. But that's where a chapter select comes in handy. For those who don't want to rework their way to a certain point in the game, you can just load up the chapter select and select a sub-chapter. Another game by Rare that did a similar thing was Grabbed by the Ghoulies, but I still think that game had slightly better replay value because, for one, there were more areas to select, and there were a lot of times where you had to, even like backtracking in that game, every time you went back to an area you already went to in a later chapter in the game, there's always something different there, though, whether it's different kind of enemies or different objectives, and the game did get tedious at times, but I still think it had pretty good replay value, especially with the gameplay variety. Yeah, I might have to make a video about Grabbed by the Ghoulies sometime. That's a pretty underrated Rare game.
Welcome to
Now, I have no idea how the heck Conkers related to this Dracula knockoff.
Free will, and bring with you some of the happiness that is so evident in your face, and so lacking in my own.
It's not getting there. Okay, I'll just cross this threshold here.
No, I think Batula looks
Sure,
a bit
that's
creepier
something
in
I don't think what it is.
the N64
Anyway,
version when he's in his vampire form, but then
Nothing.
I think in the Xbox remake when he turns into a giant bat, he looked even
seldom have
creepier
visitors
in
these
that.
parts, what being out here in the middle of nowhere on such a cold and gloomy night. Pray, follow me. You look as if you're in need of sustenance, and I have many things to eat.
Yeah, before I even knew like what this was spoofing off of, because this is spoofing off of the version of Dracula that had Gary Oldman in
Kind
it,
of sick of chocolate anyway.
and for some reason that version of Dracula wore like this really weird oversized headpiece. So before I knew that, I had no idea about that, you know, movie or design, and so I remember when I first played this, I thought that was supposed to be like a giant brain on his head or something.
I was planning to have all this knocked through.
Or like his brain was so oversized it was practically bulging
But anyway, well,
against his head or
things
something.
will just
I didn't realize that was
conservative
supposed to be like his hairpiece.
for the present. My dining room.
There's no chairs in the dining room, they're just standing at the table.
More wine.
There's nothing else on the table either, that's kind of funny. They could have fixed that in the remake, but nope. I did notice, though, that they did actually bring an unused object that was meant for this sequence in the remake. So I remember like there was a little post I saw years ago that showed like unused 3D objects that were found as leftovers in the game's data, and one of them was a candelabra.
Looks like you.
That was it kind of had like a gothic look to it, and at the time the people couldn't figure out where that went though, but upon seeing the Xbox remake and noticing how there actually is a candelabra in the center of the table during this part, that kind of leaves the impression of where that candelabra was meant to go in the N64 version. It was supposed to go in this segment, but for some reason they cut it out.
As well. Didn't they have any dentists back then?
Who are you to criticize me or my ancestors?
whose blood runs into these veins. You are not of noble birth, and never will be. Frey, accept my apologies. Whenever you talk about my ancestors, I get somewhat touchy.
Oh, that's alright. I know how it is. Family. Yeah. So, you been here long?
About 300 years.
Really? It's quite a big family then.
No, it's just me.
Oh. What's that noise?
The children of the night. What sweet music they make.
Music? The howling.
What is that noise?
Sounds like somebody's braying on the door. They don't like you either, I take it.
Sheesh, Conker.
Oh, shit. The villagers again. Sounds like there is more of them this time. This could be your lucky night, Conker. I was going to kill you and drink your blood. But now I think I'm needing your help. Pray, come here.
Can we just go back a bit there? The drinking my blood bit? What's all that about?
I said, come here. It's delicious and familiar. Yes. I think you are my great grandson, Conker. Welcome to the family. Welcome indeed. I have a little task for you. These little villagers occasionally pop up to my establishment, have a little fun, and see if they can kill me. It's never worked yet. As you can see, I've had a few minor alterations to the house. They have the grinder, and they have the pumps, and they have some other bits and pieces. It is your duty, your errand, indeed the whole point of your existence as of this day, is to fetch me the villagers, pop them in the grinder, and let me feed. You may feed too if you wish, but only later. Well? Oh yes, I forgot. You can only speak like what you are. A bat.
No, I think Conker's bat design looked a lot better in this game.
Fetch me the villagers.
He somehow works better with like the darker color scheme, but for some reason the Xbox remake they decided to keep him his regular fur color, and it's just, I don't know, I guess maybe they thought he blended in too well with the dark scenery with the dark color scheme, so they try to lighten him up a bit. I don't know, but the music during this part is pretty good. It just has a very eerie atmosphere to it. This part gets a little tedious though. You just gotta keep crapping on the villagers and dragging them into the grinder for how long. This part was a little easier in the Xbox remake though. They actually allowed you to look in first person to make it easier to... That and the controls were a lot easier too. Conker feels a little weaker in the N64 version, so it's a little harder to lift the villagers up. Yeah, I think this level has some of the best design work in the game. I mean, not only is the level probably like one of the biggest in the games, or at least like this whole mansion section, like the fact that it's you know, the fact that it's all these different rooms that aren't split apart by different sections or loading screens. It's quite impressive because it's like, technically speaking, you could say the war level was the biggest, but that was split up in so many sections compared to the spooky chapter. This was always my favorite part of the level, the maze room. Interesting how the music gets more faint when you go out here. I was curious though, like I never bothered doing this before, but I wanted to see how far I could fly up to the top of the manor. Unfortunately, that's about as far as you can go, but still cool that you can kind of fly up there though. There's some games that, you know, have like an invisible barrier that prevent you from going up that far. So it's kind of cool that you could at least go a bit on top of the roof. Huh. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I noticed, like, for some reason, in my recording footage, I'm somehow missing the scene where, you complete the bat scene where Count Batula gets defeated and you turn back into a squirrel, but I don't know what happened to that footage. I somehow accidentally trimmed it out and can't get it back, but... This part is so much harder in the Xbox remake. At least they made the controls easier for that. Yeah, this is probably the most lengthiest part in the entire game. Just having to find those 3 keys, and... if I'm not mistaken, if you get a game over during the scene, you'll have to start this entire sequence entirely over. So you'll have to recollect all the keys again, if I'm not mistaken. Like, if you die, though, after collecting 1 key or 2, it'll still leave a checkpoint there, but if I'm not mistaken, getting a game over causes you to lose it all entirely. So I've only gotten a game over during this sequence once, and that was during my first playthrough of this game many years ago. I'm not sure if the same rules would apply for the Xbox remake, though, but I'm referring to the N64 version of this. Yeah, it's amazing how useful this game became, like, in the remake when, you know, they added, you know, a right analog stick. That was one thing the N64 was lacking, and you can definitely feel it in this game where they replaced the C stick, well, the C buttons with the right stick, but, so it feels limited. But, yeah, like, that's one reason I kind of prefer the remake a lot better, because I just think that right analog stick really helps a lot of segments out. Like I thought this part was a little unresponsive in the Xbox remake though. There's just such a delay when shooting. So I like here how it actually feels like you're able to shoot down those bats a lot easier. Now it's important when playing this chapter, you gotta make sure you shoot down these bats. Otherwise when you get the first key, they will attack you until you're dead. And there is no dropping that key once you pick it up. The only way to drop the key is to fall off a cliff and hope it doesn't splat you. But yeah, it would have helped if this game gave you a button to drop objects. That would have come in handy during this chapter. This really is a trial and error kind of situation for first-time players. Now this is one of the only few parts in the game where there's barely any chocolate around to heal you, so yeah, this really does feel like a survival situation. It's like Resident Evil meets a 3D platformer during this part. I find it funny how there are like some people who brag about this level. They say like, "Oh, this level wasn't scary. I don't know what people are talking about." And all I can say is, "Well, they clearly weren't playing with the volume high up because when you play this level with like the volume up, it does get a little unnerving. There's a lot of like subtle sounds that you cannot hear when the volume's down. You got to have it up pretty high, and yeah, it does kind of give it this level of spookier vibe." That can be said about anything, though. Almost anything can give you a scare when the volume's up loud enough, but... Yeah, I hate how the zombies can respawn over time. Yeah, I kind of like how the railways on the staircase look like snakes. That's kind of a cool detail. They even kept that in the remake, luckily. Yeah, I think they did a really good job at redesigning this area in the Xbox One. A lot of it still looks pretty faithful to the design in this one, but they added a lot more detail in certain areas. Like, there's like that bottomless pit area in the dining room, and I like how they added all these like ghostly faces like swirling down at the bottom. Gives it more of like a spooky appeal. Yeah, and another reason why the enemies were a lot harder in the Xbox remake was because I remember like how if you accidentally shot them like in the legs or something like that, they'd actually fall over on the ground and start crawling towards you. I don't think they really do that in the N64 version. Was it, as it was shown that last one I shot him at the lower waist, and he didn't cripple over. He just kept walking forward. And they're a lot harder to shoot when they're down on the ground. Yeah, trust me, this part looks a lot easier than it really is. It would have helped if the controls during this part were a lot easier, but it's like you gotta use the right stick to strafe and move forward, and you gotta use the left joystick to move the crosshair. You know, it would have been so much easier if we just had to move Conker with the control stick and then aim with the C stick, or the right stick, I mean. And so that's one reason I like this part a lot better in the Xbox remake, because that's actually how the controls were. It's too bad for Rare Replay they couldn't have given an optional control touch-up for this game like they do with Jet Force Gemini. Jet Force Gemini had a pretty complicated control scheme, but they actually gave it a little patch that allowed you to fix it up, and they made it optional too, so for those who want the challenge of playing it like originally, they can, but for those who'd rather play with like right stick controls for aiming, you can. Too bad they couldn't do the same with Conker. I kind of understand why though, because Conker had only used this for a few parts, where Jet Force Gemini used that throughout the majority of the game, so throughout the game actually, from like across 3 different characters, where Conker had only used this like control scheme during 2 chapters in a row, this and the war chapter. It's like, yeah, if you think about it, this level's basically a training level for the war chapter that's coming up next, because I mean, this is more open area when it comes to the shooting, but the war area is more tight and a lot more frantic. I liked how in the war chapter of the Xbox version, though, it actually allowed you to put your weapon away. Unfortunately, in this version, it does not allow you to put your weapon away. However, it does let you do it here, though, for the spooky chapter for some reason, but it does not allow you to do that for the war chapter. Now, while I do agree that, you know, a lot of people definitely seem to agree that the war chapter is the hardest level in this game, and while I kind of agree, I always feel like this part's a little more frustrating, though, because of how much longer it is. I mean, the war section, yeah, it's definitely hard, but a lot of those are split between smaller sections, where this is just like one big, you know, segment of the game, and, it's like every time I do a playthrough of this game, like recording footage for this, it's always this segment that takes up the most data, takes up the most time. So, yeah, in a way, this is the longest section in the game. or at least the longest section of the game that isn't split up too much. So War Chapter, it definitely has the most sub-chapters throughout it, but, like, let's see, this part of the game has about, like, what, 3 or 4 little sub-chapters, because there's, of course, the opening point, where you get the gun and shoot the zombies, and then there's, getting to the mansion itself, then there's the entire bat sequence, and then there's this sequence, and then, okay, there's 5, actually, because after this, there's then one more segment, and that's, escaping the place with Mr. Barrel. Yeah, I remember, I probably lost the most lives during this part, like, when I first played the game. Ironically, now, though, it's the War Chapter that I keep dying at, especially during the final act. That's, like, it was especially harder in this version. The Xbox remake made it a little more forgiving, but, oh man, this one, yeah, I'll have to get to that in my next videos, but... Isn't this fun? Oh sure, and now it decides to give you chocolate. And unfortunately, I made a big mistake during this part. I forgot that there was a lever you had to activate. And once you pick up that key, there's no dropping it. That being said, though, that lever part is really easy to miss because, like, they don't give you a good, hint at, like, how you're supposed to approach it. Because, if you jump at it, Conker won't, like, latch onto it unless you're, like, directly in front of it. Most levers in this game, you just have to jump directly at it in order for Conker to grab on, and so, I remember, like, when I first tried, activating that originally, it did nothing, so I figured, oh, I thought that was a lever, okay, I'm gonna have to look elsewhere to find it, and I didn't, and so then eventually, I had no choice but to look up what to do, and then it told you, you have to pull that bone lever. It's like, what? I did! And so then I just kept jumping at it until eventually he latched onto it. And, it's ridiculous. See what I mean? You have to be directly in front of it, apparently. It's pretty stupid. Finally got the third key.
Right. Finally. Oh yeah, I forgot about those guys.
Okay, now this part is a pretty lame excuse, because Conker got past them before without needing Mr. Barrel. So, I find this as a lame excuse just to change the gameplay up to make it more difficult, but... Ugh, that was unfortunate. Oh no! Well, at least the door's still open. Now all the zombies are gone for some reason. Weird. So yeah, normally I am really bad at this part, but surprisingly I got through it okay this time. Usually I die at least once, but actually managed to make it this time. It's a lot easier in the Xbox remake because it's easier to control the camera during this part, but the controls are very difficult during this part though. Especially when it gets faster. Like, luckily this is just the hardest part, though. The rest of it's a lot simpler, but... if I'm not mistaken, if you crash during this part, you die. And get respawned back to the beginning. I think that or you have to work your way back up to get... I can't remember, but... I just remember this being a very frustrating part to die on. I mean, this part's a little tricky too, but... now, I always worry, like, what would happen if you decide to go backwards during this part, like, after you make it to the top. I never even want to bother trying to find out, because it just haunts me. Like, would you have to go all the way back to the beginning to get to Mr. Barrel again, or... if so, that is terrible. Luckily, once you go through that door, though, there's no going back. After you get, well, at least after you get that money. The place is then sealed off.
No, you want some great stuff.
Technically, it already was sealed off, because the cutscene you get before entering this area shows, like, the rock slide that blocks you, but... well, that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.